Why is Netanyahu not able to see the writing on the wall?
Well, I mean, there are two explanations to this. One is more short term and political, and the other is deeper and ideological. The first one is that most people in Israel would say, well, Netanyahu knows that if he agrees to any such deal, whatever it might be, to stop the war and return the hostages, which is what the majority of the Israeli public wants, he will lose his coalition partners, his coalition would collapse. He would have to declare elections. And in those elections, he might lose. If he loses, then there would be a state commission of inquiry over what happened on October 7th, the fiasco of October 7th. He would be found, obviously, the major culprit because he was head of state. And his trial for corruption, which has been going on now for 5 years, the judges may finally have the courage to convict him. So he cannot afford to lose his coalition. He has to stay in power. That's the sort of political explanation, and I think it's true, but I don't think it's all of it. Netanyahu has been adamantly always against the Palestinian state. And he tried to manage this by saying, look, we can manage the situation. And in large part, he agreed. He succeeded to the extent that in Israel, the last few election campaigns before the last one in 2022, when he formed this very far right government, the occupation never came up. It was not an issue. And you will recall that the international community kind of forgot about the Palestinians. No one really cared about them anymore. It wasn't an issue at all. And in fact, Israel and Saudi Arabia and the US were talking about creating some kind of agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, actually opening trade routes to India, and everything seemed wonderful, apart from the fact that nobody spoke about the Palestinians. And Hamas, seeing that, obviously chose to act when it did because he was afraid that an agreement with Saudi Arabia and the United States and Israel would finally sweep them completely under the rug. And so for Netanyahu, there's an ideological aspect to this. He cannot agree to anything that would facilitate some kind of sharing of the space between the 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians who live in the territory between the river and the sea.
The anger is only growing. Why not end the war?
Well, look, I mean, let me expand this a bit because the truth of the matter is that those states that are now speaking about maybe in September recognizing a Palestinian state are states that talked about a two-state solution long ago. This is not something new. And then they gradually started shifting away from that. And so for a long time, as I said, Britain, Germany, France, the US, Canada were sort of buying the Israeli line. Now that you see this catastrophe happening in Gaza and under pressure of their own publics, because public opinion in the world has
Yeah.
changed and it's not so reflected in the political elites, they have to respond to this public pressure. So that's one thing that we have to understand. The second thing is, yes, there are obviously people in Israel who are quite well aware of that. Also, people who feel the personal consequences that when they go to Europe, people don't want to serve them, don't want to let Israeli cruise ships come into harbors because of anger as to what Israel is doing. But the people at the top right now are very extreme. And for them, the fact that the entire world is, well, parts of the world, I would say, but important parts for Israel, protesting against Israeli actions only radicalizes them more because the whole logic of people like that is the entire world is against us. We always knew it. And we now have the opportunity. And one has to understand that the far right in Israel, but including Netanyahu, after it recovered from the shock of October 7th, started thinking of it as an opportunity to finally accomplish what they want to accomplish. And I think they believe that if they can do that, then eventually the world will get used to it. We just have to do it now as forcefully and quickly as we can. One of the ministers there, Ben Gvir, says repeatedly, as he said just yesterday, we have to concentrate the population in the south and then encourage them to migrate. and encouraged by not giving them food, not giving them water, and bombing them so that they will be persuaded to leave. So about 30% of the population in Israel supports that, but that 30% is heavily represented in the current cabinet, and there's no uh, potent opposition. The opposition in Israel has been very weak, has not been able to present any alternative, is repeatedly hounded by the government, is afraid of its own public. So the only way that Israeli policy will change will be not because of declarations that in September there might be a recognition of a Palestinian state, which on itself is an empty declaration. There is no state, and it won't
Yeah.
happen because Macron says it would, but rather immediate direct pressure on Israel, economic pressure and pressure by limiting the arming of Israel. The US and Germany are providing Israel with huge amounts of munitions on a daily basis. If that were to be limited, then things would change quite quickly on the ground.
How about Trump's role in this thing? Trump getting re-elected and coming to power for his second term. How has that emboldened Netanyahu's Gaza plan?
Well, I mean, it did two things. Partly because we don't know what Trump's policy is. Um, we don't know what decision he will make at any moment. So, two clear things happened. Just before Trump came into office, he actually forced Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire that began in January. And that ceasefire facilitated bringing food to Gaza in large amounts and releasing large numbers of hostages. And that was a good thing. And Netanyahu, who might have
Right.
resisted President Biden, accepted that from Trump because he's more, afraid of Trump. But then when Netanyahu went to Washington and met Trump, then Trump said publicly, he said, well, we have to remove the people of Gaza from Gaza for a while at least, because we have to rebuild the place. And then we
Hmm.
can rebuild it as a beautiful resort area. It's a wonderful beach there. Uh, Now, he later sort of forgot about that statement, but in Israel, that statement was endorsed across the board. Yes, now we have license from the United States to remove the Palestinians from Gaza, flatten it, rebuild it, of course, with Arab money, not with Israeli money or American money, and then, of course, not build hotels and resorts in the Trump style, but build Jewish settlements there. So he is playing on both sides. And when Israel broke the ceasefire, the U.S. did nothing. Now he has expressed anxiety. He saw the pictures coming from Gaza on TV. They're not shown that much, but they were shown a little bit on Fox TV, and that's what he watches. And so he said, "Oh, that's terrible," and Melania thinks it's also terrible. So we have to do something about it. But nothing was done. And right now, Israel has a carte blanche, as far as we know, from Trump. And as long as he does, it will continue doing what it's doing. If he changes his mind tomorrow, everybody knows that in Israel. The US can stop Israel within 2 weeks, but it hasn't done so. And maybe he will, and maybe he won't. I don't know that he knows at the moment, but we can, hope for it.